Zoning Board of Appeals regular meeting on March 15th, 2023. Call to order and roll call, please.
Certainly. Member Fisher?
Here.
Member Danley?
Here.
Member Russell?
Here.
Member Toll?
Here.
Member Sorensen and Member Miller are absent. Chair Peters?
Here. Thank
We
you.
have a quorum.
All right. Agenda item number 2, non-agenda items and visitors' public comment time. As you know, we allocate 15 minutes for issues that aren't on the agenda for tonight. Seeing nobody in the audience other than Drew, anybody on the internet?
There is nobody participating online.
All right, we'll go on to agenda item number 3, consideration of the February 15th, 2023 PCZBA regular meeting minutes. Everybody's had a chance to review them, I take it? Any proposed revisions or other changes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda item number 4 has been reset to the currently the April 19th, 2023 PCZBA meeting. And agenda item number 5 is reset also to
So my recommendation, there was newspaper notice provided for this, correct? Yes. Yeah, so because the newspaper notice was provided, I know there was other notice issues, but I would recommend that there be a motion on each item, continuing it to that next meeting. So that way we don't have to republish the newspaper notice unless we so choose.
Okay.
I move to continue item number 4 to the April meeting.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. With respect to agenda item number 5,
I'll move to continue that to the April meeting as well.
okay. Second, George?
Second? So for the record, that'll be on April 19th, 2023.
All right. Agenda item number 6, public hearing text amendments, historic preservation zoning incentive. Eric, give us an overview, please.
Did you need to do a voice vote on that last one?
Oh,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Good call.
Motion carries.
There you go.
All right, so this is back to the historic preservation incentives. For zoning incentives, that was last discussed at the February 15th PCZBA meeting, where the PCZBA discussed codifying zoning flexibility and allowing up to a 10% floor area bonus for locally landmarked homes. With this in mind, the village staff, along with village attorney Ben Schuster, drafted 2 draft ordinances for you to review. The first was at the last meeting in regards to the consideration of the historical nature of landmarked homes. And the second is a floor area bonus that would be up to 10% automatic. However, it would also not apply for any homes that are already exceeding 110% of the floor area ratio within the code.
Thank you, Eric. With respect to the first proposed amendment, any further discussion from the commissioners on that?
Can I just ask a question? So, for example, one that we were going to hear about tonight was 525, which is a landmark building. And they wanted to do a shed. And you would think, being landmarked, that it should go through an architect review board. I know that's not our position. We're more about the ordinance and zoning. But when we're giving all these incentives and perks and benefits, shouldn't we also somehow, and I don't know where we write this, in a text amendment, discuss having the stringent regulations or landmarking that another accessory building should follow those same guidelines?
So there is a process for building on a landmark property. It partly depends on what's landmarked. If it's the property as a whole, if it's the house or particular feature on a house, the landscape. because we can designate, depending how it's designated, and when it gets landmarked, it's gonna be designated based on what's historic. So you can think about a house that may, it's that ordinance that is adopted, that landmark that's gonna stipulate, and then it goes through the HPC process already. Now, we don't say you can never, ever, ever tear something down, but there is a review process of, that is looked at, and whether the
And who
proposed.
looks at the new build then? Who, like, an accessory building?
HPC, so let me pull
Okay.
up the code provision.
The HPC did do an advisory review last Wednesday on this
Okay.
property, and they found that it didn't, it still matched with, it didn't mess up any like historical nature of the building.
Can you look at this, bring up on the computer the standards that they look at that considers those architectural elements and features that it's consistent, to your point?
Okay.
And as a matter of composition, the HPC from time to time has actually had members that are architects. At this present time, I don't believe they do.
Okay. Just a question.
So that one did go through, 525 did have HPC look at it
Review it.
and terminate their.
But not the Architectural Review Board. It
That
just
is
goes
correct.
through because it's landmark, it only goes
To the HPC.
HPC.
Presently, the village's review doesn't consider single-family residential. Other than as part of a PRD, it'll get looked at, but not
Right.
one-off, right?
Right.
And I'm just sharing on the screen right now. This is from last Wednesday's historic, oh no, this is the zoning one. This isn't what I'm looking for.
Wrong screen.
Yeah, so for example, in 9-14-35 of the code, no alteration or demolition may occur to a protected feature without first satisfying the requirements of the section, except if a certification applies. The commission will review any such proposed alteration or a demolition in order to evaluate the consistency of any proposed work with the criteria provided in section 9-1430, and either allow the work that is generally consistent with the criteria to proceed expediently with minimum procedural delay, or for work that is inconsistent, attempt to reach a mutually satisfactory resolution that satisfies the owner's interest in the commission's concerns. And then there's criteria for protected features, 9-14-30, and they are up on your screen. I will not read all of them and save my voice, but
Yeah, number 2, alterations that do not affect any essential architectural or historic characteristics of a feature as viewed from adjacent, and I can't see it covered up.
Public or
Public or
private
private
street ordinarily should be permitted.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it should go through it. I don't know. I just feel like that's, it just seems like there's just so many outlots and accessories, and if we don't have the high regard now with reference to a landmark building, and they could put up a shed just because it doesn't touch it, it's okay, and yet it's pretty tall and large and a mass in the back. I don't know. That's just, I don't know how to,
Your understanding, though, that Ben and Drew are saying it does have to, every one of these would have to go to HPC. They
HPC,
just
historical,
don't
right,
go, the
They don't go
process
to the
just doesn't
architectural.
refer it to
ABR.
right.
right.
But you're indicating.
I guess
you
I'm just
think-
questioning it. It's like, is that enough to go through the historic and not an architectural review?
Can
At a
the-
landmark building, like a landmark that we treasure, that
Can
is,
the HPC refer it to the ABR if there is a question like that? Do they have that possibility? Do they have
So
that- do they have that option?
I don't think it's technically prohibited. It's not provided for in our code. And the issue with this process is there's a time frame in which there's, the idea, the way it's set up is that It's that mutual resolution language that we talked about, that somebody wants to do something to a landmark. They're not prohibited, but they go through the process. There's a time period in which is review and hopefully a resolution if the HPC determines that it doesn't meet the standards. But it's a policy decision of the village of whether it wants to institute more stringent rules.
Maybe we can look at the criteria again and see if there's something in particular, if there's language that could maybe be supported or modified to address your specific concern about, being architecturally consistent, like with the protected feature. I think that's what this says, but it says it in a way that it's not that it almost reads like it's if it doesn't interfere with it,
Well, and I think it's
but not
factor,
necessarily accent or amplify.
so I think it
right?
would be
Yeah.
factor 3.
Yeah.
The construction of the new structures and buildings and alterations to landscapes, because it's a shed, it would be a new structure or building. Should not be discouraged when such construction or alteration does not destroy significant historical, architectural, or cultural characteristics and is compatible with the size, scale, color, material, and character of the existing features, neighborhood and/or environment.
So they clearly thought the size, scale, and material was appropriate.
I can't, Drew, I don't, you might remember, but I can't think, at least in the last several years, of a time where there was a landmark structure that was either rehabbed, added to, that was not done by an architect. And I would have to imagine architects around here would want to,
Right.
I'm sure they like the work,
they,
right?
they like the work, but they,
Yeah.
they don't want to make something ugly, right?
Yeah,
So, I mean, I can't think of an example where it wasn't, we didn't have professionally drawn plans. So I don't know. I feel like
Just
that by itself is, at least, we get some professional, whether it's if the HPC doesn't have any architects on the board at the time, we generally do have a professional architect involved.
And I will say at the HPC last week, in regards to that property, that was one of the things the architect did discuss, was how they were trying to match the shed to the home in terms of historical architectural aesthetics.
Right, they put a little trim on and,
there's a little window at the top.
right.
The siding was gonna be the same color, I think.
I do agree,
Well,
Drew. I mean, I think we do need to be cognizant of changes made to landmark structures that are not within character, compatible with the character of the existing structure. So, I do agree with you.
So I guess, from a code standpoint, this is not in the zoning code, it's in the municipal code, but the idea that it seems to be at least hitting with the concern, scale, materials, all those things that you would want. I don't know that there's more specific language in other I kind of think like the DNA of most historic preservation regulations match the US standards from the, I'm trying to think of that section of the US code that deals with National Historic, you know what I'm talking about? That's like the backbone of all the preservation
I'm
regulations.
trying to remember what it's called, but yes, I know what you're talking about, yeah.
That's the most, everybody has the same backbone because it's been tested, right? So ours is like that too. I'm trying to think of other communities that would have another design review element to it. I'm sure there's examples out there, I'm just none.
Right. I think that the big distinction with our code, the decision that, the policy decision that's been made in the past, is that an owner can still proceed with the work even if the HBC finds that it's not compatible and doesn't meet the standards.
Just a time period has to
The
elapse.
time period they have to elapse, and different communities may use different time periods. Most communities around here don't have a way to, they have chosen to say, it's your own property, you can do what you want, we'll discourage it, we'll try to mediate a resolution. But ultimately, if you want to tear something down or modify or put something on your property, that's your decision. That's a policy choice. There can be landmarking in some communities take a much more stringent approach about what can be done and what can't be done. And that's ultimately, it is a policy decision for the village board because, it's not really, this is not in the zoning code. And so, but, and you're certainly welcome to express your concerns to the board if you don't think it's the right balance in our code, but that's kind of the process of where we're
Yeah.
at.
And from a practical consideration, I know the ABR has, maybe it's just Bob Hunter since he's been chair, which has been always, as long as he's here, I don't want to review single-family properties. So there's been that pushback,
Sure.
that's been the reception when asked or when it's been brought up in the past is, no, thank you.
And I'll tell you, it's funny, because last night I was at a board meeting in Winnetka, and people brought up homes, saying it's this, there was a home, and I don't know the property, but what a shame, it was such a nice home, it's in a prominent spot, and somebody put this horrendous thing up, and they, and what can we do about that? And these conversations I know are happening up and down the North Shore and it's
For
striking
decades.
Yeah, for decades.
Yeah.
And, it's a
Right.
tough thing, and they ended up in the same general position with their code, which is on historic properties, we don't say no, you just have to go through a process and hopefully you reach resolution and delay.
Right.
And I guess, let me say this maybe a different way too, is let's say, for example, somebody wanted to put a shed on their property that requires zoning relief. At the end of the day, the ZBA, PCZBA still looks at that, can still put conditions on that. So there's different tools that still exist.
Right. I mean, the one caution with that is if there's conditions that you think are appropriate from a zoning land use perspective, it's not purely a design,
It doesn't prohibit that completely.
Right, you can say, I think this should match the house, it'd be great if it was in red and not yellow, but ultimately, you would be focusing more on the zoning and land use aspect more than the design. So,
Okay.
And I think that the original goal kind of was to incentivize people to keep the houses and, do that. So, putting it through another committee seems more onerous, I guess, than, and I think that most people trying to do that, to Aaron's point, probably are doing it pretty well,
We hope, right.
yeah.
now, the other thing that could happen is a home could lose its designation. If work is done that destroys the historical nature of the home, and from your zoning amendments that we have before you, then they would no longer be eligible for those benefits. So the variation criteria would fall away. When we talk about an FAR bonus that they would be able to use, well, if they're gonna do something, they say, we wanna build for this, we're gonna use our bonus to build this horribly obnoxious addition that destroys the historical character, we would take away the designation and they don't get the bonus. So I know that's been tried to do it with the carrot more than the stick,
Sure.
so.
I don't think this is, I don't know if we really pointed this one out, but the 91430C rehab guidelines for distinctive stylistic elements or examples of skilled craftsmanship that characterize a feature should be maintained and preserved if possible. Again, trying to make sure all those are
No, that's-
woven into it.
Yeah. It's almost like, we have them go through all the hardships when they're trying to seek a variance, it's almost like, let's go through the list and make sure they check everything before they get things done. I'm sure that's what they were doing. All right.
Not exactly on point, but did the Historic Preservation Commission recently reduce its number of members from 7 to 5? Or
No.
it's always been 5?
There is an opening on the HPC. in terms of like the
So there's 4 people? running?
members. There are, I think there's 6 at the moment.
Oh, okay. Some reason I was thinking they were 5, there was a 5-member board. All right. Really off point then.
6.
Is that a volunteer hand going up? I said,
So there's more of an 7-member board.
quick, take a picture.
There are
Oh, wait, it's on video.
opportunities for
Yeah.
architects to
Most certainly.
participate on that board
Yeah.
as well as.
And there have been in the past, from time to time, yeah.
Any further discussion on, with respect to Jill's comments? All right. With respect to the proposed First Amendment, any discussion on that? Amendment to 10-2C-15. In this particular instance, we're a recommending body to the village council. Any further discussion on the first proposed amendment? Hearing none, is there a motion, please?
I move we recommend approval to the village board of the proposed ordinance as written.
Second.
Second.
So, Member Danley,
Yeah, yes, sorry.
Member Fisher, Member Russell,
Yes?
Member Toll,
Aye.
Chair Peters.
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you. With respect to the second proposed amendment, and that is Article 10-2C. Any discussion regarding the verbiage on that draft? I think the only modification was just the additional language with respect to not exceeding the 110% of maximum floor area ratio.
And I just want to clarify that even if it is a legally non-conforming in regards to the FAR, this does not restrict a homeowner from requesting relief.
So they could request a variation,
They just don't automatically get the 10%.
So the language is written very intentionally to say this subsection shall not apply to properties that already exceed 110. So you couldn't, if you're way over, say, I want even more.
Automatically.
But it doesn't preclude somebody from coming in and asking for a variation, you know, and particularly if it's an old historic property on a small lot, you know, they very well may exceed our requirements. So they would be able to apply, and remember, with the other amendment you're recommending, it would be taken into account that they are landmarked as part of that consideration.
Great, thank you.
And they would automatically have already gone through the HPC process.
Yes. So, well, there's two pieces. So this is for structures that are already this is as designated protected feature. So they will have gone through that process to be designated. And then they would only get the bonus if the work that they're proposing to do to utilize the bonus meets the criteria. So so in this middle of this paragraph, you know, it states, if the alteration or work is consistent with the criteria provided in section 9-14-30, which is what we just put up on the screen.
Right.
So they don't get the bonus if they're gonna do something horribly noxious, destroying the character that's inconsistent with the landmark. Doesn't mean they couldn't do it, but they're not gonna get the bonus to do it. And then they're gonna have a smaller FAR requirement to meet.
Got it.
Any further discussions with respect to the proposed amendment? Hearing none, is there a motion, please? Again, we're recommending body.
I move to recommend the village board approve the text amendment.
Thank you.
Second?
Second. If we could have a vote, please.
Roll call, certainly. Member Danley?
Aye.
Member Fisher?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Member Toll?
Aye.
Chair Peters?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item number 7, staff report.
I currently do not have anything for the staff report. As mentioned before, the 2 items, earlier public hearings, have been moved to the April 19th meeting. We have also received an application, another variation application for the April 19th meeting. So at this point, there will be 3 public hearings for variations on April 19th.
Okay.
I would add 2 more items if I may.
Oh, certainly.
The first of which is, this is Eric's last meeting, right? April 4th.
Zoning meeting.
Last zoning meeting, right? Yeah.
That is the last zoning meeting.
But we have gone through a process to find a new assistant to the village administrator position, person for that position, and we have successfully landed somebody who will be here March 31st. Clara is a planner at the Village of Gurnee. She has her AICP certifications, a master in public administration, and an undergrad in sustainability, political science, and geography. So like, this is like the, what do you call that? The trifecta of planning people. So she's been a planner since 2016. She's now a senior planner there. She's been promoted. Before that, she worked in the private sector on solar incentives, working with that. So she seems to be a very good fit, and young mother, and excited to start, and we are as well. So we're looking forward to her beginning, and so she'll be here with you guys next month. And I think we're gonna talk a little bit about that. So I said 2 things, I lied, there's 3 things. The second thing I wanted to mention was that this is somewhat old news, but the owner of Stonebridge has started demolition of the manor and the gatehouse, and I think tomorrow we're supposed to get some rain, and he's gonna spend some time working on the gatehouse tomorrow. We've asked him as a best practice to kind of hang a curtain on the north, given its proximity to the structures there, right by the gatehouse, and so he's gonna work on the tower tomorrow and try to bring that in, but contractor thinks they'll be done within 30 days, and it's so far it's been relatively quiet, but it's, they're hauling out equipment, materials. The demo manager contractor did find some other pieces of architectural artifacts that he saved for us that are small and some very large. He actually pulled off the copper roofs and said, "Do you guys want these?" And like, "They're as big as this room." Like, "No, we're gonna put them." So anyway, but so he's been very, very helpful in that regard. So, but that's moving along. The other item I wanted to mention is I received, I think, 3 emails today having to do with the village's tree ordinance, the preservation ordinance that was adopted after a multi-year process back in '08. I think was the last most significant update to the village's tree preservation code. And there has been, I think, some concern come up with some tree removals of late, that of some larger healthy trees. And I think the conversation that was explained, and I took a phone call from Member Danley earlier today about the same issue, was that the village's regulations, like most of its regulations, there are to make it difficult, but you still can do it. If a tree isn't healthy, it may be healthy, but you can remove it, but it's not incentivized. It's the opposite, right? It's trying to disincentivize somebody taking out a large tree. Doesn't mean you can't do it, though. So there's a process that exists, and I think the conversation was, should the village have more restrictive regulations to try to protect some of these larger, older hardwood species, as like heritage trees? That's kind of the general takeaway. And we've been talking about the village's tree program, and we've outsourced our tree maintenance and tree trimming work, and so we're on a rigid quarterly review now. We've been planting a lot of new species of trees and a more diverse species of trees, trying to avoid the EABs and all that, the Dutch elm, trying to avoid having too many of the same species. And then we're also been doing some grant work to remove buckthorn and other invasives to protect quality trees, and some of that review work has talked about maybe the village revisiting its tree code, so that may be something that may come up, but I think the conversation was, is that something that you guys, you don't have to decide tonight, but maybe something you may just want to talk about taking up again and having a willingness to review that, knowing that you are very close to be handed the comprehensive land use plan update, which is significant. At the same time, you may be given a chance, just like you guys recently updated the PRD code, section of the zoning code, maybe looking at the village's R5 or multifamily code too. So you're gonna be busy, and so just be aware of that, and how much capacity do you have and willingness to work on those issues, and that's also with, the ebb and flow of other petitions, so. Hopefully I addressed that issue for you.
No, that was great. Is there any way, though, with the tree ordinance hadn't been looked at since 2008? A lot of things have changed since then. Probably spending $2,000 to tear down a tree, a healthy tree, isn't even that expensive for some residents.
It's not a flat fee.
It's not a flat fee, right. It's based on the arborist or the forester coming in, evaluating the tree, understanding the condition of it, and then
Size of it.
and its size of
The
it, and it's
species,
based on
all of that.
Right. Is there any way, since looking at an ordinance and going through this committee again would take some time, especially with other issues, as you mentioned, coming up, is there any way to put a halt? I mean, is there any way to just stop any trees that are potentially going to be torn down with this fee and just stop and say we're reevaluating our ordinance? Is this something that's ever been done, that you can pause the
Like a moratorium
action?
on tree permits?
Yes. Can't we do something
I
like
haven't
that?
seen one for trees, but theoretically, I don't see why you couldn't do a short moratorium while you were studying it. It
Right.
would require adoption by the village board of an ordinance adopting the moratorium. The issue, I guess, just to understand its implication, if you did that, would be somebody who's building on their property, has plans for additions, has plans for new building. If a moratorium comes down, they come to apply for a permit to do the work that they planned, they may be in a position where all of a sudden they can't take down the tree and can't engage in construction, particularly if it's in the spot where they're planning to build. So it has implications, but if that's something that you'd like pursued, we can study it and I can report back to staff on what options may be.
And I think that would be practical, very difficult to do. And I think would maybe a big request of the board to consider.
Sure.
And maybe the thing to do is, probably the thing that's most ripe in the tree ordinance to re-examine would be the cost per inch. Just taking a market snapshot of what that is, and that would have an immediate implication on your concern, at least as I understand it, that if it's $150 an inch, maybe not enough anymore. It was okay in 2008.
Right.
That number is a lot smaller today. And so maybe that's a way to do it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that residents, because it would be a public hearing, as a zoning right, people would not, that ordinance, I think was it 3 years in the works? I mean, it was I think the Plan Commission studied it for a long time before, that was even before this group was joined together. I'm trying to remember, but I think it was a very extensive review, because, I mean, think about how much that touches every homeowner, right? Everybody has trees on their property, right? It's
Right.
expansive in who it reaches. The universe is everyone.
Right.
So,
And
yeah.
just, maybe it's just, you know how sometimes you look at something with a new filter and you start seeing, and again, there's been diseases in town, there's been the trimming because of our wires and cables and what else, but there's also being taken down for play lots and playgrounds and just more sky versus the trees that we have. So the reasons that I'm seeing that some of these trees are being taken down should not be allowed. And I know we're not in a dictatorship, but I think we also have the love, and our beloved trees should somehow be recognized a little strongly. And maybe it's a financial thing that we can talk about, but I think a lot's changed since 2008. And also, or perhaps there's a way to incentive that if something comes down, something should be replaced.
Yeah, and I will tell you,
Now, that's hard. Tree police are not out there, but
well, they are.
they are, okay.
That's one thing residents are great at.
Oh, right, there you go.
Why is this tree going down? So I don't see a permit. So, it happened 2 days ago. Yeah, maybe it was today. But, so what we do is, so the village's sliding scale is if it's a tree that you have to replace at a 125 or 150% of what's there, so that is, okay, or you can do a payment in lieu of. What we always tell people is, we don't want the money. It's not about the money, we want the trees. And so what we let people do this is, people like money, and so they would rather have an opportunity to get their money back. So we say, if you plant trees, we give them an extremely long period of time to work with and stretch what the ordinance allows. And I think we did it over a 10-year period one time, since I've been here, to allow people to plant trees. It's not about the money. It's like, we want the inches back in the ground. So that's what we've done, and we work with homeowners to that end to say, we don't care about, $3,000 or $7,000 in tree cash. We want, go put 300 inches of trees back in. And if you can't do it here, let's find other places you can put it. So we work with property owners to try to achieve that goal.
Have we done any study, Drew, that analyzes how many of the various types of trees? I think we have a gradation of 3 or 4 or 5 different levels of trees. How many healthy ones are coming down per year? In other words, if it's type A, that we're losing 20 healthy trees a year, or whatever it is?
Yes, we have done that from time to time. We've reported that out, at least the ones that the village is aware of. Some of the things that we will do for like some large scale projects where they're removing a lot of invasives, some of the things that, we won't keep track of every buckthorn
Right.
or maybe but generally speaking, we have a good idea of what's been removed. And we've actually been trying to do like this, we call it the Leafy 500. We're trying to get 500 trees back in the ground. The village lost a lot to emerald ash borer. And a lot of those trees that we lost, and I'm thinking like East Blodgett, I think there were literally hundreds of volunteer ash trees that the village never planted. They just came up,
Right.
dropped from birds or whatever, and made their way over time and got to be of good size, but we took them all down. I mean, I think we lost, I'm trying to remember the number we lost. I think it was close to 480 something. That's what if we were trying to get back to that net 500, add trees back in, most of them were ash, and a lot of them were volunteer. The village there was a period of time when the village, I think, had access to very inexpensive ash trees, and we were planting a lot of them in the parkways, but most of them were volunteers.
Would there be any way to do something maybe with open lands or something where we actually say to people, hey, we would love you to plant these kind of trees or these kind of native species, just do some, people actually like to donate things, and maybe that would be one way that it's not gonna solve what you're talking about, but maybe, as you said, the ashes grew up and became good trees. So if we incentivize, if we just said, hey, people, would you do this and plant as many as you can on your yard, that makes sense.
There's a group of residents that we've, given trees. Those, like the Possibility Place has native species that are small and easily handled by one person. And they're not 3-inch caliper trees. They're smaller than that. They're like a 5-gallon bucket trees. And so they're not the biggest, the people look at them like, oh, it's a Charlie Brown Christmas tree.
But
What
those
is
grow
that?
fast.
Right, yes, they do. They grow rapidly, but, we have done that with Lobola, and some other residents have kind of worked together, kind of grassroots, pun intended. And we've been doing actually a lot of that in the last few years. We have done, in conjunction with Lobola, mini tree sales on the village green. And we've done them kind of got to the point where people just were like, we don't want them anymore, right? So it's like you couldn't give them away almost. And we ran into that last summer. And so we've been doing, I think we did, I keep looking at you as if you remember, Eric, sorry.
I don't think
I think we did like 50 of those last summer.
Okay.
So we did it through the farmers market Fridays. We set up there and said, hey, you want one of these? Sign up and we'll put it in your parkway and we'll give it to you. And so we did that program. So we're trying those programs to get more trees in the ground.
Okay.
It's the landmark trees that we care,
It's
that
the
I'm
bigger one,
talking
right.
about.
You're talking about like the 68-inch white oak at. yeah,
Landmark.
Yeah,
That was our theme tonight, landmark, so maybe we should.
Heritage
landmark our
trees, yes.
Heritage trees.
What species did you lose in your neighborhood, Jill?
Well, I mean, there's just talk that some big oaks are gonna, come down and, yeah, I know, for no reason, but,
and I mean, we are on a lot of people's naughty list, the village, because people will have like, your street trees penetrating my sanitary sewer liner, and
Right.
we're like, sorry. We're not gonna let you take it down, and we're not gonna take it down. People don't like that answer.
I think in my mind, what would be most helpful to know is how many trees, healthy trees, are actually of the type A, the two best classes of trees, are actually coming down because people don't want the tree. Because I would think that probably 9 out of 10 trees that come down, exclusive of the ones that come down within the footprint for construction, are actually trees that our forester or our consultant has looked at them and said, yes, it needs to come down. And people just aren't aware that they're diseased trees or they're considered a hazardous tree. I hope that's the case. I know the last uproar that I was aware of was Sunrise Park. 2 or 3 years ago, there was 8 or 9 relatively large trees that all came down at once. And, the village hall, I was told, confirmed that you looked at all those trees and by golly, every one of them should come down. And I think, unfortunately, many times the trees are dying, and the average resident like myself, because I'm mortified, I know when I walked in front of the Lemieux's house for months,
That
The
oak?
two big trees that were, not the one that came down recently, that's been dying, but the two on the other side, there were big red ribbons around
For
those
trimming.
massive oaks for months.
Yeah.
And I even asked the homeowner, Kathy Lemieux, why are those trees marked? And she didn't know, and they were in front of her yard. The ribbons have since come down, but there's.
To make sure they
I
weren't
think
missed, part of the
sometimes
trimming
there's just
program.
Oh.
There's not enough information out there, and
Yeah.
I would think before we would ever consider a moratorium, we'd want to know that data. How many people are just buying the right to take a nice tree?
More than you think.
They're laying $4,000-5,000 out because they don't want the 30-inch oak in their front yard.
Yeah.
I mean, is that really happen? Is that what happened? with
It
this
happens.
particular
what's
it-
happening.
It happens from time to time.
In all three, these 3 calls you're talking about, they were all relative to the one tree?
I think so.
And, right, but there's been others, there's been others in the neighborhood that have come down.
At our old house on Scranton, we had a heritage oak fall down, not even in a storm. It was a big, I don't know, it was over 30 inch
It was
diameter.
huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
Otherwise, looked perfectly healthy, but half of the root system had rotted away. And when we had them cleaning up that, they took a look at a couple other trees on our property and said, nope, they're about to go too. And we didn't think that there was anything wrong with them. The village
One in
took
the
down
rear yard
one.
took, was it a neighbor's that fell on your yard, or was it yours fell to the
It was
neighbor?
ours that fell on the speculators.
There was another huge tree that
Huge.
looked good otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's,
And so the consultant said that, we had one that was pretty close to our house, leaning towards our house, and he said that one's gonna go any day. So that one came down, and then the village took one down in the parkway, another, I don't know, probably a close to 30-inch oak.
let me talk to Jake about that and find out. And we'll also maybe do a quick survey if we can too, of what other communities are charging per inch to see if we're just out of balance with the market.
That'd be great.
That'd be a quick cursory thing to do. I'm thinking of is the hickory tree, that there was a zoning application not too long ago here about a hickory tree dropping nuts on a neighboring property, and that was problematic, and they were,
Oh,
do
that's
you
right.
remember that? I sure remember that. But those are situations we get where the village may have a hickory tree in the parkway, and it's like, it's dropping on my car. We're like, sorry. So, yeah.
The only other big project we've seen that, what's the status of the tank at the lake?
The what, I'm sorry?
Started? The tank at the
Oh,
lake?
no, no. We have, this is the North Shore Water Reclamation District, million-gallon reservoir that they're going to install, hopefully start soon. We are working with them on the trucking routes, and the biggest issue is they probably have 30 very significant delivery, like lowboy of very long steel rebar and some other forms that are, it's enough that they're asking us to shut down, to not allow parking on their entire trucking route. And for up to 30 times, and we're trying to say, we need to be reasonable. People still, I mean, it's hard to say, well, you can't, there was as many, imagine how many landscapers are parked on the street on any day of the week, and so it's just, it's difficult. So we're trying to come up with a plan that would say, every Wednesday, no parking on Center Avenue until 10 a.m. So it's not, so it's like, at least homeowners can plan around it, and people know it's coming, and that covers probably 80% of these deliveries. And then we can do some special timing and say, hey, 48-hour notice, we're gonna need to come out, come in these times. And so we're trying to figure those things out, those details, as well as their communication plan. We were still waiting on, here's your signage, here's your, they're gonna do constant contact, anybody wants to sign up for it, here's our website, so just so that the communication is crystal clear what's happening and when.
We are getting the sense, though, that they have a sense of urgency, correct?
It's funny.
This summer is almost.
Yeah, I think we were all concerned, right, that, the finish line is May 2024, right? And so they haven't screamed, and they're, have been moving on a decent pace, but it's not, they're not calling the village or the park district every hour or anything like that at all. So I don't think their contractor must be occupied elsewhere, right? So that they're not screaming yet. And they haven't said, we need to start looking at weekend construction yet either. They haven't done that. So, I know the Park District is still kind of working out some of the details from some of their operational needs about like a dumpster, and they're still trying to investigate ways to ensure that paddle boarders and kayakers will have a window of time when they can safely bring their equipment down without fear of trucking going back and forth. Because right now, it's just the weekends and after 5 p.m. when you can really say there'll be inactivity down there. So we're trying to figure out if there's other ways to do it. I mean, obviously there'll be a flagger on site when they're having trucks coming in and out during the day. But even then, it's just, you don't want to say, oh, you can always just wait your turn. I mean, it's going to try a lot of people's patience, we imagine, so. Yeah, so that's kind of where that is.
Can you get a tractor trailer going down the road at the beach?
Well, we thought they'd want to go down Scranton because the turn down the hill would be not a full 90, but what they want to do is they want to take advantage of the boulevard for these trucks and come and turn and have them swing, and so they can make that 90 easier on Sunrise, and then they pull forward, back down the hill,
Oh, they back down. Okay.
and then pull straight out, come back the way they came, and then when they come, they'll back down Sunrise again, and then make a left turn back on Center.
And
Jill, they're probably thinking that massive oak right at the end of Center will be no problem taking down so they can make the turn.
I like to be able to blame them for that.
Rabbit's hole.
Yeah.
All right.
We were hoping they would invest in a barging company and a sod field, right? That's what they're gonna need this summer.
There you go.
And the road down to the beachfront can handle
We'll
these?
it'll get rebuilt either way.
Oh, get through, okay.
Because, I mean, it's really, besides the park district, they're the main user, right? I mean, the village uses it for public safety rescues from time to time, but really, I mean, they're going down there with their maintenance crews to maintain their facilities. Probably the park district's the #1 user, honestly, but.
Yeah, it certainly was urgency last fall.
It's gonna be a busy summer. Start hearing those sheet pilings being banged in.
All right. Agenda item number 8, Commissioners' Report. I think we shouldn't lose sight of the tree ordinance issue, because we just can't afford to lose those types of assets. So maybe we keep it sort of on the
Eric
quasi.
can't leave until he collects the data.
Part of the contract with our current firm that's doing all the trimming, they're tagging and updating our database. We've had our ongoing database that had some assumptions, okay, well, this tree should have grown this much, but this is where I get an actual new tags, measurements, health rate reading, huge new database, updating our existing one.
Any other topics for discussion tonight? All right. Hearing none. Agenda number 9, adjournment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you very much.